Hello, my name is John, and this is my talk titled Feeling and Folding the Archives, Origami Darkroom Prints of Wartime Incarceration. This is an example of my work that I'll talk about, but before I dive in, I would first like to address my identity a little bit. I'm a part white Shin-Sansei. My Obaba was born in Tokyo a few years before the outbreak of World War II and emigrated to northern New Jersey in 1960, where I was born and raised in part by her. I have no direct ancestral connection to those Japanese Americans incarcerated during the war, but I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to share my work with the community who inspires and fuels it. But I am primarily here to Daima to listen. I'll provide my contact information at the end of this presentation, and I welcome any feedback, concerns, conversation, suggestions, or questions from you all. This talk is meant to discuss the feelings I felt performing research with digitized archival photography from the camps, and how my current art practice is an attempt to understand those feelings in connection to the feelings and memory of other Nikkei I've read and talked to, and especially to thank those who have influenced my work. How can I, a Shin Nikkei, feel and connect with archival images from concentration camps? And how can I contextualize and converse with digital images that I see on my computer screen? As an architectural history student in college, I researched the camps. I was particularly interested in the remarkable works of architecture and urbanism built by camp communities with scrap and found material, and especially in comparison to Osamu Noguchi's unbuilt proposals at Post and One. In that research, I heavily relied on art, literature, and journalism produced in the camps, especially photographic documentation. I found that I felt a deep, uncanny connection to these photographs, the most widely available being those taken by the War Relocation Authority photographic section, at least for documenting the built environment. This is some examples of some of those images from the National Archives. I would like to say that the WRA photographs are not the only photographs taken in the camps. We have many other photographs taken by the rare occurrence of someone confined in the camp, smuggling in or in some way having a camera. People like Bill Monbo, Toyo Miyatake, and Jack Murrow were able to produce images that were not propaganda like the WRA photos, but document the camps as seen through the eyes of someone confined there. I do not use their images in my artwork because I don't want to reinterpret them or obscure those. Here are some examples of Bill Monbo's work from Heart Mountain, which I really cannot help but include because they are so incredible. So, I remember this image in particular, an unnamed woman sitting at a vanity in her tar paper barrack. It looks just like memories I have of my Obaba, a Japanese woman sitting in a dress in front of a mirror in her suburban home in Metuchen, New Jersey. However, as anyone with knowledge about WRA photography knows, these were propaganda images, intentionally staged to make these deeply inhumane camps seem humane to the white American public. They were intentionally staged to draw that exact false connection between the tar paper barrack and a suburban utopia. From reading the work of many Nikkei scholars, I understood this, yet the image still felt strangely familiar. My Obaba was also in an absurd and extraordinary, though very different circumstance, also a circumstance that many Issei experienced, those incarcerated included. Being an Asian immigrant without a college degree or perfect English, living in an almost entirely white suburban landscape. Like many of us know, her assimilation could be approached but never attained, entirely because of racism and prejudice, and a lot of that was stoked by World War II, and it was still very much alive in Metuchen when she was living there. However, I realized these are more images. I realized another connection I felt to these images was on the other side of the camera, with majority white photographers who visited the camps to produce these propaganda images for the WRA. Like many Nikkei with part white ancestry, I have many racist white people in my family. I have many privileges because of that ancestry, but I am also aware of that parts of me harmed other parts of me. While my Japanese ancestry has formed my identity and experience in America more than my white ancestry, for many reasons I'd be happy to discuss, I feel that parts of me I love and also parts of me that I disdain were so deep inside and beyond these images. I feel them in 3 dimensions very strongly, but certainly not in the way that someone with an ancestral connection would feel. Most of my research started in 2020 during the early pandemic. Because of this, the only archives I could access were those that were digitized and freely available online, like Calisphere, the Online Archive of California, especially Densho, of course, the Library of Congress, and primarily the National Archives catalog, which contains most of these WRA photographs. Because of the intense connection I felt with these images, I found myself spending many all-nighters poring through archive websites until my eyes were dry and bloodshot, staring at a computer screen. It was so bizarre to feel such a deep connection to these images that I could not touch or feel, only see virtually. So I would print out many of them just so I could hold them and hang them on my walls, but it never felt close enough. When I dreamed of visiting the National Archives to see the original images, I was saddened by the fact that I would have to wear gloves in a heavily controlled environment. So that makes complete sense. When I say I want to literally ingest and consume them, I really mean it. Though I never actually ate the printed paper, I swear. These WRA images of wartime incarceration are so much more than simple photographic documentation of the camps. I could use origami as a metaphor for how they should be understood. A process which distorts something flat and fills it with memory, fiction, desire, even trauma. And in order to investigate that folded form's context, you must unfold it and confront the pattern of the creases. My art practice is to literally do this, to explore what it means to recontextualize, what it means to really feel an image, and especially to fold up and unfold the meaning behind these images. So now to my art. This is an early work. I've been working for about 2 years in a color darkroom at the Fleischer Art Memorial, which is a community art school here in Philadelphia where I live. I work under the instruction of a very talented experimental printmaker named Ahmed Salvador. About a year ago, I started working with origami in the darkroom, which is inspired by other printmakers who combine origami and photography. But I'm not aware of any who do so in a color darkroom, and I'm also not aware of any artists with Japanese ancestry who do this. So if anyone knows any, please let me know. I would be so interested in seeing that. Like so many Japanese American kids who still have connections with relatives in Japan, I received a pad of nice origami paper from them every New Year's. And because of that, it's been a part of me and my cultural background ever since I can remember. I've folded some patterns so many times that they are really a part of my bodily memory. This is an early work, so I fold the origami in the dark because the paper is sensitive to light. And then I line it up underneath an enlarger and expose negatives onto the folded form. You can see in this work that folding the paper distorts the image. This is it folded up the way that I would print it. And then this is it flattened and distorted. This is because all parts of the paper are at different angles and elevations, not flat and exposed in the same way. That's what I liked about it. And I'll talk more about how that relates to my recent work with archival images in a second. For those who aren't familiar with the color darkroom, here's a picture of the one I work in, the enlargers and the open trays. And here's a picture of it in operation. Actually, this is just a black rectangle because I can't take my phone out in there, but it's pretty much exactly what you see when you enter a color darkroom. Because color photo paper is sensitive to any color of light, there is no safe light like in a black and white darkroom. We work in near complete darkness. And I actually have to stand in the darkest corner of the darkness because of the unconventional amount of time I have my photo paper out of the box while folding it. Folding origami in the dark requires me to work only from feel and memory. I can't refer to instructions, and I can't use my eyes to line up the edges. I work only with my hands to feel when the paper aligns, only from memory of folding these patterns a countless number of times, and I have to focus intently on where I am in the pattern. I also have to keep in mind the photographic print the entire time. and how it will be projected onto that folded image. It's a slow process, and I have the paper out for a very long time, and I touch it far more than conventional printmaking requires. And in thinking about how that final image will appear on this paper that I've been touching and folding for so long, I feel like I'm really spending a lot of time with these images, touching and feeling the images in a fulfilling way, expressing that desire I originally felt while viewing these archival images. Because origami is such a part of me, and because of the slow and careful process, I felt like I was imbuing the final print with this cultural memory and labor, containing parts of me and parts of my body. It feels really great. Side note, but I actually really recommend trying to fold origami in the dark. You can enter a dark room or just simply close your eyes, which is how I practice. Get a piece of square paper. I'd recommend starting with thicker paper than regular origami squares, like printer paper or even cardstock, and just see how it goes. If you know an origami pattern by heart, you can try that. If you don't, learn one with the intention of memorizing it, which itself is a really fun process. I honestly find that I fold origami better in the dark because my eyes can't make me anxious during a process that's really about your hands. You truly gain something by removing a sense that's supposed to be objective when you're making art like origami. Your eyes can't confuse you. Okay, so after doing this for a few months with photographs I took myself, I read a very important book this past January titled Unseeing Empire, Photography Representation South Asian America by Bhagirathi Mani, a current professor in the Asian American Studies Department at the University of Pennsylvania. In this book, she discusses the idea of representation in Asian American art, which is something so often associated with our community. She analyzes the work of a few South Asian artists who challenge and expand what representation can mean, and especially who challenge the content and meaning of colonial archives. This includes the works of those artists shown here, Anu Palakunathu Matthew and Seher Shah, who both work with archival images and have deeply inspired my own work. I realized in reading Professor Mani's work that I really relate to how she describes her own experience of viewing art from her own diaspora and feeling an innate deep connection, even if the content and context of the work is very different from her own experience. This is exactly how I relate to these archival images I've been working with and thinking about so long. Something just clicked. I could use this origami process to attempt to reconcile my feeling of connection with these images, to reconcile the uncanny feeling of representation I felt despite that not being the case in many ways. I see memory in them, and I want to touch and feel them as much as possible, yet it's a distorted feeling. So how could I incorporate these images into my work? First, I had to figure out how to get these images in a format that I could use in the darkroom. I clearly don't have access to the original negatives, so I felt the best way to do this was to take a 35mm film photograph of my computer screen. Here are some negatives, the one at the bottom being a photo I took on my phone of my grandparents' living room. I also really like the idea, given that I've only ever seen these works on a computer screen inside of a web browser open to an archive interface. And through taking photographs of my entire computer screen, I could communicate the format that I knew these images to be in, with countless tabs open at the top, the title and the image of the title and description of the image right next to it, the glaring brightness of the LED display, and the colors of the interface surrounding this black and white image. Sorry. These are like analog versions of a screenshot, kind of. When I take these, I construct a little dark tent with blankets and chairs to avoid reflection in the screen, and I don't have a tripod, so I really have to line up my body physically with the computer screen and connect us together. Also, the camera I use, this one, this lovely camera, is very important to me. This one is a Nikon Nikomat my Obaba bought in Japan in 1969, the first and only time my father had visited Japan when he was just 2 years old. I'm so grateful to have this camera, as it's one of my family's own It's the one most of my family's own photographic archive was taken with. Before I get to my archival prints, I want to say that a few of my works include images of people and families. some identified in WRA captions and some identified. I worked with these images solely because they made me feel so strongly, though I really want to express that this is a deeply personal practice, and I feel very uncomfortable sharing them with the world as my art. I have no intention of exhibiting these anywhere, especially no intention of selling them, but I feel that this forum at Tadaima is one of the only places it may be appropriate to share them solely for this community. If anyone knows anything about the images I've used or about the people in them, I'd love to learn more about it and the content. I hope this doesn't offend anyone, and I really want to emphasize that they really belong to the people in them and their ancestors, not to me. I've moved entirely away from using images of people and work I intend on sharing with the world. Oh, these are some actual scans of prints I made with the negatives that I took of my computer screen. So these are darkroom prints of a screenshot of the computer screen. Top left is a Densho Instagram post. Bottom is something I'll talk about later. Top right is also something I'll talk about later. Also not aware of, I'm not selling these. I'm just trying to share them. I'm not aware of like permissions or restrictions used that might be involved with these images. So I guess that's that. So I started with boxes, some prints on the interior and some prints on the exterior. These boxes are not that easy to fold in the dark, and they take a lot of time. I could easily use my entire 3-hour-a-week allotment in the darkroom just finishing an imperfect version of one print. Really not saying this to be impressive. I'm more saying this to explain why I don't have a ton of work to share over the year I've been working on this. With these exterior prints, I would print the box on top of a flat sheet of other photo paper. I felt that in this way, I pulled the image out of the frame of the computer screen, elevating them above the digital interface with paper I've been touching and folding for a long time. We would also leave these flat prints with holes in them, like this, where the box covered it. I felt like I was capturing these images in a vessel which I made, which contains so much memory and feeling, and removing them from the flatness of the computer screen. Yeah, and I just really like how the unfolded print works. How it doesn't just, the light doesn't just hit the top of the box, but because of the imperfection of the origami, it kind of bleeds over the edges. I like these ones more where I printed the image on the interior of the box. These are really where I want to go with this work, to make an image that makes sense when it takes the form of cultural memory and feeling, this origami form. But when it's flattened like a conventional photographic print, it becomes fractured and obscured. Each of these prints has two forms. This is exactly how archival images should be read and interpreted. Again, you can't take them at face value as a normal photograph, an objective documentation of time. They require background knowledge and experience to see the full image. I would like to show you what I mean exactly by the folding. I'll make my face bigger right now. Apologies for that. Hello. So this is the flat print, and I will fold it up. And now we have the image. It's a little distorted. I'm sure you can't see it or read it very well, but you see that this is how I printed in the image. This is when it becomes whole, when I am able to fold it into a box. Let's get back to sharing my screen. Okay, I'm tiny again. Okay. I feel especially strongly about this print. A print of a WRA photograph of the Hisayasu family playing in their barrack, surrounded by furniture that Howard Hisayasu built himself. This information is from the WRA caption, and that's all I have about it. Each member of the family is located in a different corner of the print when it's flattened. This was completely unintentional. I should not be the one to imbue this image with the trauma of family separation that happened during wartime incarceration. Absolutely not. This shows, though, that this process alone, folding photo paper in the dark and printing it in the color darkroom, can elucidate even more meaning than I intend to put into it. This is a very special process to me, and I encourage anyone interested to adapt or replicate my process. This is really not mine alone. Unfortunately, access to a darkroom is a huge privilege that I have, as they're expensive and hard to come by. I'm deeply grateful to Fleischer and Ahmed Salvador for having an accessible color darkroom, especially one that uses open trays, which hardly exist anymore, even at art schools, and are really necessary to make my work because I can't feed it through a machine. I'd like to talk to a second and credit what gave me the idea for using these boxes in the first place. This satirical article published in the Topaz Trek, which means a lot to me. Written under the pseudonym Globularius Schraube, M.A., who is a caricature of white academics who studied non-white subjects like H.L. Mencken. Several articles were published by Globularius. His bio is one of my favorite jokes about academia, which you can see in the upper left corner. The initials attached to Globularius Schraube's name do not mean Master of Arts. They do not even mean Master of Asses. In fact, they signify nothing. He puts them there because he likes them. It's so funny to me. Different sources credit different names for Globularius's writing, primarily Jim Yamada and Jim Oki. However, I love this particular article so much, it evacuates characters and how to analyze them, because of the comics, which are signed by Jim Oki. Comics are another form of art that are very important to me, as my Obaba gave me a love of them by originally giving me copies of old Calvin and Hobbes collections. I'll try to not get into this too much, but the comics in this article in many ways resisted camp's authorities, getting jokes and protests past censors with prominent visual symbols and mistranslation that they wouldn't understand, but that Japanese Americans reading this would. However, comics like Calvin and Hobbes don't resist white American childhood, they define it. And after learning about this article, I realized that giving these collections of Calvin and Hobbes and other comics to me and my father are a way that my Obaba tried to teach us how to be American kids to protect us in a way she couldn't do. Seeing comics instead be used to resist American fascism makes me deeply emotional. I especially like this particular excerpt, furnishing it with those boxes, a house can be made into a palace. These drawings and this text appear in my work frequently. Recently, I've been working with cranes, which may be a bit cliche, but it's that way for a reason. They are one of the most important cultural icons of origami that exist, and because of that, their pattern is so very deep in my body and brain. They have many symbolic meanings, one of them being longevity, and this is something I want to reproduce in my art, to give these old photographs a new and extended life. They also offer a more complex, more fragmented print, which I really love and care about. Like this one, which was, apologies, also made with something called solarization, which is something you can only do in the color darkroom, where you expose the print to light while it is developing. Also, I really like folding these cranes, because my father recently told me that my Obaba would be proud that I can fold a crane in the dark, and that makes me really happy. I haven't worked with them much, but I will continue to in the foreseeable future. I realized that I can create something like a collage by exposing the crane twice, once on top and once on the bottom, with either the same or different image. This gives the final print more complexity and covers the entire folded object's exterior in the photographs. I feel similarly about these prints as I do about the interior box prints. When they're folded, they make sense, like this. You can see very clearly the image that was printed onto them. But when they're flattened, that image is taken out of its context and you can't really tell what's going on. On the left is a flat piece of paper that I put under a crane that I exposed twice. So you see the shadow of the top of the crane and the bottom of the crane overlapping on top of the print. This is a recent practice, but one I love, and most of these prints are test prints. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I used this image, which is an image of Easter dinner at my grandparents' house that I took on my phone, pretty much just because I had the color balance and timed exposure dialed in, so I was able to work with it very quickly and try out a lot of things. This dinner, ham, peas, and Japanese beer feels like my family. Also, I think about food and the memory it holds all the time, every time I cook dinner, which is often Japanese food. I also really love the collage aspect of these prints, which was the original motivation for printing them on both sides. I was heavily inspired by the work of Sansei artist Dean Terasaki, who makes incredible photographic collages that are far more impressive than my own. I'm grateful to have found his work through a Densho article, and it really demonstrated me the power that collage can communicate meaning with, in and with photographs in a different way than I've been doing. He describes his photo montages as expressions about the complex interaction between culture, personal memory, and the experience of time, which deeply resonates with me in my art practice. This one, Treat Me to Something, features one of the letters sent to TK Pharmacy, which Dean's uncle ran in Denver, Colorado during World War II. The letters were from incarcerated Japanese Americans requesting medical supplies and other hard-to-come-by supplies in the camps. Densho's staff describes them as, quote, ordinary, everyday items tell us a lot about what life was like in the camps, how Japanese Americans passed the endless time, coped with the conditions of confinement, and above all, survived. Dean Terasaki's collages of photograph and historical material overlay history and transcend time to find and express so much meaning. I don't want to talk to his work too much by myself, but I am honored to have been introduced to his work and to have had the opportunity to speak with him about it. You can find more at his website, which is at the bottom. Just remember to include the .xyz, and I really recommend checking out the interview we did for Densho if you'd like to learn more about his work. Additionally, Densho's collection of these TK Pharmacy letters is a remarkable piece of Japanese history, Japanese American history. I really hope to one day get my work to a point where I can communicate as much meaning that Dean Terasaki does in his work. So thank you. I plan on working with both family archives and wartime incarceration archives, like in this final and most recent print. With this crane, I printed one image on top of the crane from a WRA photograph of the dining hall in Manzanar, and printed another image of that Easter dinner print on the bottom of the crane. Then I unfolded it and printed another image of text from Trek on top of it, which overlays everything else, including the unexposed paper inside the crane. Sorry, these are the images that is on top of the photo of the crane. This is the one that's on the bottom. This practice of printing the text on top of the collage is clearly also inspired by Dean Terasaki, but I feel like but I like the feeling that I'm tucking a secret, very special thing inside of the origami, which already has so much meaning, filling the entire object instead of it just existing on the outside. However, that text can be seen when you unfold the object. To collage my own family dinner with a photograph of Manzanar isn't meant to draw direct connections to them. They are in very different contexts, and when given that context in the form of the crane, they are on opposite sides. However, when unfolded and flattened, they fragment and fracture next to each other, mixing together in an uncertain way, just as I feel about my own experience viewing images like this. Honestly, I'm not sure how to explain the connection between the text and the images on this print. This is just an experiment, and it's something I'll be developing in my future work that I think is very special, and I'm very excited to share with you. That's all about me specifically. I hope I've clearly expressed what my work means to me and how I use this practice to explore the personal meaning that digital archives of WRA photography have to me, and how I hope to use it to communicate the meaning of these works. I'd like to credit some more people before I go who have all influenced my work. First, there are too many Nikkei scholars and authors who have given me the background knowledge to understand and work with these images. But I would like to especially credit the extensive work of Lane Ryo Hirabayashi for contextualizing these images for me. Additionally, conversations with Rob Busher have deeply informed my understanding and knowledge about these images. I'm here at Tadaima thanks to Rob, and I've had the pleasure of working with him on an exhibition he directed with the Japan America Society of Greater Philadelphia, titled Dokairi Welcome Home, the Nisei Legacy at Shifuso. Working on this exhibition with him and everyone else at the JASGP has taught me so much about what community means and the importance and complexity of archival work. This is not an official sponsorship. I was not told to put this in here. I just really want to share this with many people because it really informed my work. You can access our website via the link below or scanning the QR code that's there. And you can see so many photographs that Rob and assistant curator Lauren Griffin found in our archives and beyond. And if you're in Philadelphia, please visit Shifuso and see for yourself. Additionally, here's a slide of many books that have informed my knowledge that I presented here, including Hirabayashi's book, Japanese American Resettlement Through the Lens. Feeling Photography contains an amazing essay by David L. Ng about Rhea Tajiri's work that informed my thinking about this talk a lot. And Colors of Confinement documents Bill Monbo's extraordinary work in context. Artifacts of Loss is a wonderful book about art and craft produced in the camps. And Karente Yamashita's Letter to Memory explores what it means to understand a family's archive, to understand and contextualize archival material and the work that it requires. She uses a form of fiction in letters that is really beautiful, and it really expanded my idea of what art can do to interpret an archive. I would also like to thank the platforms that have taught me so much, of course, including Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages, but also Densho and the Tsusaku Project, among many others. I am deeply grateful for the Nikkei community and everyone I've been able to learn from and talk to, especially those in the JACL Philadelphia chapter. Thank you for listening to me talk so much, but I am mostly here to listen. So here's my personal email. It is jkriney12@gmail.com. I am really open to anything and everything community members have to say about this talk, because this work would not exist without you, and I always have more to understand, more to learn, and more to understand. Again, any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions for things to learn are very much welcomed. Please reach out to me if you have any thoughts about my work or what I've said in this talk. I would really, really appreciate it. Finally, I would like to thank my Obaba, Masu Isano, whose courageous spirit has guided me my whole life. That's it. Thank you for listening. And I hope you check out everything else in Tadaima. Thank you.